Hey there. Happy Wednesday. 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to shoot this fun little fashion brand piece for a local Philly company called Bonnie. There's very little prep, very little crew, just a fun concept cooked up by my buddy Pat that we were able to kind of accomplish within a 12-hour studio day. So I thought it might be fun to kind of break down how I go about approaching a project that has almost zero prep, budget, crew, and how you can still kind of make that look really professional, in my opinion. So without further ado, here's a spot and we'll break it down after.
All right, let's roll camera. Camera speeds.
Bonnie is a French word. It means outcast. I used to think it was weird to be an outcast. It's important when you're being yourself to just be authentic and be unapologetic about it. That's what Bonnie represents. We are all outcasts. Sometimes it's scary. Sometimes there's fog. Sometimes there's not clarity. I dreamed about this. I dreamed about it. I rehearsed it. I became it. And that's why we're here today. My name is Malco, and this is my brand, Bonnie.
So yeah, that was it. I think it turned out pretty swell. Getting started, like I said, crew was very minimal for this project. It was just me on all things camera, Pat directing, Colin producing, and my buddy Alex on kind of BTS PA role. With very few hands, I knew the setups could not be very complex, and we also needed a ton of coverage in both spaces as this was a very fast-paced edit. So my kind of thought going into this, getting there, was like, all right, I needed to kind of just light the spaces so we can just spray them down in as many angles and compositions as possible. For our first scene here in the kind of brick studio looking space, it was literally just simple 3-point lighting with a little bit of razzle dazzle to make things pop. Because I knew we were gonna be going from wides all the way to macros and the talent was gonna be moving all around the space, I wanted to have as big of a key light as possible. So what I ended up going with was an 8x8 of full grid with a Nova and a Forza 500B punching through that, and those were double broke with, I want to say, quarter grid as well. So it was just a very large, soft key light. The one interesting thing that I did do with these lights is I had the Forza 500B at about 60%, and then I had the Nova at about half of that. And my thinking in doing this was basically that it kind of gave a gradient of light across the 8x instead of just like its full percentage all the way across and then it drops off to nothing. And so as the talent was kind of moving around the space, as they moved a little bit further or closer to the light gradually increased and gradually decreased. And so it kind of helped to make that feel more natural rather than they're in full light and now they're out of light. Another thing I did to kind of help mitigate the change in light levels as the subject walked around the space was I had that 8x8 as far back as I could possibly get it. And that has something to do with the inverse square law. I'm not smart enough to really explain it to you, so if you want to know what that means, look it up. It basically just means if you get the light further away from your talent, they can move around more without the light really changing on their face. So we had that back as far as I could get it away from him and kind of had that gradient of light coming across it to kind of really help us to make sure the light was staying even on his face as he moved around. Also, I don't think I mentioned it yet, but both of those lights were set to 4300 Kelvin because we wanted a little bit of a warmer look on his face, but we didn't want to go like full 3200, and our white balancing camera was set to 56. After we got that all set up, the one thing I did notice is that our light was kind of spilling all over the place as this was just a very large uncontrolled soft source. So to fix that, we just put up a couple floppies on the side of the key light that was open to our set. And that kind of helped to rein back in our contrast and really only have that light hitting our talent in the area he would be walking around in. The next light we added in frame was a 200X with barn doors and a grid on it, just to kind of act as a little bit of separation and hair light, and also to act as a in-frame practical light. The kind of look we were going for this scene was kind of a BTS photo shoot kind of vibe. And so we wanted to have some film photo elements kind of in frame. And that also worked for us because it gave us lights to motivate off of. Because like I've talked about many times before, you always want to be motivating your light off of something. And normally it can be like a window or you're outside, so it's the sun. But in this case, we didn't have any of that. And so we needed some sort of artificial fixture that could act as that motivation. And so this light did that for us here. I had this light set to 3200 Kelvin at literally 1%. Our final light that we set up that was strictly just for razzle dazzle purposes was a 200X with a spotlight mount on it, and it was just kind of shooting as a spot or a slash kind of into the wall there behind that clothing rack. The reason why I set this up was kind of looking at frame. I noticed that the left side of the frame just kind of felt very muddy, like it was just the wall and the rack all kind of were at similar levels, and so I wanted to kind of separate that out. And normally the way I would do that is by putting like a light mat or something overhead of that clothing rack, because the clothes is really what we're trying to show off here, as this is a clothing commercial. But, you know, like I said, small crew, small budget, we didn't really have access to a light mat that I could rig overhead. So what we came up with, or what I came up with, was just kind of shooting this 200X with a spotlight mount just behind that clothing rack. And so that did a couple things for us. One, it gave us some more specular highlights to add visual interest to our scene. And then it also separated out that clothing rack from the background, drawing your eye to the clothing rack and to the products while not actually lighting them. So it worked on a couple different levels, and I'm honestly very happy with how this kind of turned out here. And then I just ran around with my trusty FX3 2470 combo and just got as many different and interesting shots as I could for the next like 2 hours. We also used a VHS camera to, you know, add a little bit of mixed media elements in there as well and kind of help with the variety in our edit, as we only were shooting in 2 spaces for this whole spot. After that, we moved to the back of the studio space and shot our final scene, which was kind of the working late night in the office kind of vibe. And I'm gonna totally level with you here. This scene was hard as f. My original idea kind of going into this was that we were gonna put a couple lights outside to kind of act as like a soft moonlight push, and then some harder streaks of like sodium vapor lights that could be coming from street lights outside. And then this, you know, would have acted as the kind of motivation for all of our lights indoors and key light and kind of room tone. But unfortunately, as we moved into this scene, it started pouring rain outside, and so we were not able to put any fixtures outside, which really threw a wrench in things, as, you know, this was kind of motivating all of our lighting. And our first shot was supposed to be this 16mm super high up wide shot that you would see like the entire room. So trying to hide fixtures inside to make it feel like nighttime while showing an entire space was going to be damn near impossible. After fiddling around for a bit in this super wide shot trying to get something that looked halfway decent, we kind of just realized that with the scenario we now found ourselves in, with not being able to put lights outside, that you know, we were going to need to do something else. And so I used the single greatest piece of advice that a mentor of mine gave me about a year ago, which was, if your frame is not working, just shrink it. And it worked beautifully. So if you're ever doing a shot and it's like just not working with the fixtures that you have, or whatever the scenario is, just push in a little bit, and normally you'll be able to figure something out that will work better, because when you're closer, it's just much easier to light things. So the first light that I set up here was kind of our moonlight ambience, which was either a 200X or a Nova bouncing off the back wall there, and that was just kind of giving this soft, ambient, cooler push to the whole scene, kind of feeling like it's maybe coming from a window that's kind of off frame left. The next light that I set up was kind of, again, stretching that moonlight ambience and kind of really applying it to our talent, and that was the Nanlite Pavo Slim, also set to 6,000 Kelvin with a grid on, and that was just kind of acting as a hair light, edge light, just to really kind of separate him out from the background. After that, I taped a Aperture MC up inside that light you see on the desk there, and this did 2 things. It lit our product hoodie, which was on the desk there, and it also was kind of bouncing around and hitting our talent's face a little bit, and kind of giving us something to motivate our true key light off of. But this kind of helped to light him a little bit, light the desk a little bit, and light the product. And then from there, the only other light that we added was our key light, which was just a Nanlite Pavo tube, the 4-foot version, with that pool noodle on there, and I literally just kind of balanced it on a chair in an angle that looked realistic enough to my eye, and we set that to, I want to say, 3200 Kelvin, as well as that MC that was in the lamp. And that was it for this scene lighting wise. So, you know, what started out as a super complicated setup ended up only being 4 lights, one of which balanced on a chair. Overall, for the resources we had, I'm extremely happy with how this project turned out. And, you know, it was really fun kind of getting back to doing filmmaking the way I started doing filmmaking, which was just running around with a camera with a couple buddies and shooting stuff that looks cool to us. You know, and that's a lot of fun and not something I get to do as often as I would like currently. So I'm going to try to do way more of these projects because they're a lot of fun. Hopefully you found some part of this video useful or interesting, or you at least had some fun watching it. And, you know, if not, as always, my apologies, and I'll see you next week. Bye.
Dude. Damn.